Now in this next segment, what I'd like to do is introduce you to CopyFlex. And we're talking about the advantages that the different mold making materials offer. And so, as you can see, CopyFlex is a silicone liquid and it comes in two parts. And you combine it, it's a 1-to-1 mix ratio, so that means equal amounts of part B and part A. And so what we're going to do here is we're going to make what we call a multi-cavity mold. So I have these little carousel horses, and let's say that we've got a project where these would work perfectly. Okay, and we need a lot of them, so let's say that we want to make a mold that has more than one cavity, so we can really kind of bang these pieces out and put them on a cake or whatever your project is. So the liquid silicone, the CopyFlex, makes the production of a multi-cavity mold very easy, because what we can do is we can pour over all the objects at once. So what we're going to do is I've got just this plexiglass square, and I've marked where I want to put my carousel horses. Now the first thing we've got to think about is when we're pouring the silicone over these pieces, we don't want them to move, okay? So I have a material, and we call it anchor dit, and it is a thick paste made of food grade waxes. Now you can use a brush if you'd like, but I've just gotten used to using my fingers. Don't worry, these materials are completely non-toxic. In fact, I've been told that the dits, we have 3 different types, actually soften your skin. So there's some people who get a secondary benefit from the anchor dit. Anyway, what I'm doing is I'm just putting on a very uniform coating. And if I had to guess, I would say it's about a 1/16 of an inch. And you want to make sure that it really is applied all the way to the edges on the on the underside of your piece. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to set it down, and I'm going to press down on my piece. Now, what I'm doing is I'm creating what I call a smush. And I say that so you'll remember what this looks like, okay? And if we can get a close-up here, you can actually see the anchor dit being squeezed out all along the edges. And that's exactly what you want, okay? Now, anchor dit is not a commercial adhesive. It's not a contact cement. So it never really helps out a lot side to side. What this is going to do is generally keep this piece in place, seal around the perimeter, and make sure that when we're pouring silicone, it doesn't move or float. So once we have our smush established, what we're going to then do is we can just take a natural bristle brush, and we're going to brush the excess off of the perimeter. And you can just use your brush to just remove the excess dit, just like that. Now, once we're done that, I like to go in with a tissue and really make sure that any excess anchor dit has been cleaned up. If you don't, the anchor dit is going to cause a kind of like a deformation in your mold. You're not going to have a clean line, and so you really want to make sure that you clean it up. So what I'm going to do is I am going to mount the next carousel horse right like that, and I'll come back and show you the next step. Now that I have the carousel horses mounted down with anchor dit, what I want to show you is a cool little trick that you can use with safety clay. Now remember, safety clay is a non-toxic, non-drying clay that is a very effective tool for mold making. And what I have here is just a ribbon of safety clay. Just like you would use when you cut a ribbon in fondant or when you cut a ribbon in gum paste, and as you can see, it's about maybe 1/4 of an inch thick. The larger the project, the thicker the clay should be. Now we call it a ribbon, okay? But when I stand it up like this, now we have a wall. We have a flexible wall that we can manipulate into any shape that we want. And so the idea is that we're going to build a custom-sized, custom-shaped mold box wall to retain the CopyFlex when we pour it over these two items. And what we can do is we have great control over the shape and how close we have this wall to our objects. And a lot of times, we use too much silicone when we use something that already exists, like we cut the bottom off of this and put it over an object, or we'll use a container like this. But when you use safety clay to make your mold box, you can make it the perfect size and shape that you need for the project that you're working on. So what I'm doing here is I'm just standing it up on its edge, and I'm kind of custom shaping the walls. I can actually go in and out and get as close as I want. And I don't know, is that a nice shot right there? So now you can see that we have about 1/4 of an inch clearance around all the pieces inside, and that's going to be just perfect. Now, I want to show you something that's important. Whenever you're using safety clay, what you want to do is you want to take one of the dits and just rub it into the surface that's going to come in contact with the silicone. Okay, now we are not putting a lot on here. Okay, it's not very much at all. If the surface is shiny, you've applied enough. This is not something technical. You don't have to spend a lot of time doing this, okay? But you should know that the silicone will stick to safety clay if you don't put a release agent like one of the dits on it. And that's, it's not bad if you didn't. It's not absolutely essential that you put a release agent, because you can always just peel the clay off of the silicone and then wash your mold and all the safety clay will come out. But it's just a nice step to do right up front, and what will happen is that you're going to just be able to peel off this clay very nicely. So I've positioned my clay wall, and then you see the seam there. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a little more safety clay and I'm just going to overlap that just like that, and I'm going to kind of press that in. Now I have this kind of snake or rope of safety clay, and just standing safety clay on its side like that, that's not going to hold the CopyFlex. I mean, it could burst on you, and the last thing you want is a CopyFlex leak. And so what I'm doing here is I'm going to make kind of like a reinforcement by just making this string, and we're going to put it around the outside bottom edge of our mold box. Okay. Now I like to overlap, and then I'll just cut through both of them. See that? And then it lines up perfectly. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to press this down along the bottom, and I'm pressing so that it comes in contact with my safety clay wall and also the plate or the surface that I'm working on. Okay? Now I don't want to distort the shape of my clay wall, so I'm kind of counterbalancing with a finger inside. But when we do this, what we do is we really make our clay wall secure. Now you can also come by and just kind of score these two together to create better interconnectivity between the outside clay reinforcement and the wall itself. We have our mold box and we have our pieces all mounted, and so we're ready to go. So now what we're going to do is get into actually mixing the CopyFlex and applying it. What I have here is pre-portioned amounts of CopyFlex, part A, which is orange, part B, which is white. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to combine them into one container. Now, once we have all of the part A in there, what we're going to do is right on top, we're going to pour the part B. Of course, I weighed these out ahead of time on a scale. So, as you can see, we have both parts mixed together or combined in the same container. And now all I'm doing is I'm going to be mixing part A and B together. Now, a lot of people think that CopyFlex is complicated, but really you can do this, okay? All we're doing is just mixing these two liquids together, and I'm really, taking the time to scrape the sides and the bottom while I mix. One of the secrets, one of the things that I teach to ensure that you get proper mixing is always have two mixing containers of an equal size. And after mixing the first combination, go ahead and transfer it into the second container. What this does is we have remnants of unmixed CopyFlex on the sides and the bottom. And so what we're doing is we're turning everything upside down. You're giving yourself access to the bottom so you can scrape that out. And now you can see the bottom now is on the top, which is very good. And now we can just give it a final mix. And you can be very, very sure that you've combined the two parts properly. Okay, now the next step that we're going to use, a lot of people ask me, how do you clean up spills? Okay, well, what I recommend is just taking a tissue, okay, and take the majority off and just keep rubbing, and you can clean it up very, very easily. So, these carousel horses have a heck of a lot of detail on them. And what I want to do is I want to skim coat them first by using a brush. And what I want to do is just make sure that I am getting all the smallest details wetted with the CopyFlex. So, and I can get this on so thin that I can actually see through this coating that I'm applying. But a lot of times when you're pouring the silicone over objects, sometimes it'll bridge over a very fine detail and trap air. And once the air is trapped in that detail and the silicone is lying on top, it'll never go in the detail. And that's an air bubble that you're going to see in your mold. So it's a really nice idea before you actually pour the CopyFlex to actually paint into the details. We have now both of our pieces coated nicely with the CopyFlex. And now let's get to the fun part. Again, a lot of people say, well, do I throw my brush away? You know what? I take a tissue, and what I keep doing is wiping and wiping the brush. And I can get about 5 uses. I'm not going to get all the silicone out of it, that's true. So you just wipe out as much of this CopyFlex as you can. And then we have what we call silicone cleanup cloths. And this has a solvent. It is not harmful to your skin. It is not toxic. But what you can do is it works really great at getting your brush really clean. Of course, your surfaces and anything that needs a silicone cleanup. That's what these cloths are really good for. So we've got our brush clean, and now, like I said, let's get to the fun part, which is actually pouring the silicone. So here's the thing that I want to show you. We're going to take the CopyFlex, And what we're going to do is we're going to roll it over the edge and let it drop down. Now notice, I'm just staying in one place for now until I get my speed right. But I want to tell you that we want it to drop about 12 inches, and you can even drop it from higher, because what happens is that as the silicone stretches over the edge and down, a lot of the large bubbles that you might see here are actually popping because the material is being stretched into this needle-like shape. So we call this a stretch pour. And what I do is I just kind of follow the wave of silicone, and I pour just around the perimeter. The most important thing is I normally don't pour directly over an object. I like to just guide the CopyFlex and let it enrobe or engulf my objects like a big wave, you know, like a silicone tsunami. That's what it should look like. And so now, you know, I'm never pouring on the object itself, I'm pouring on the CopyFlex. So now that I have all the CopyFlex poured into my mold box, you can see how it is settling and achieving its natural level. And those bubbles that you see, I don't want you to worry about them because those will pop. The CopyFlex has a viscosity so that the air that is trapped in the silicone will float to the top, and they will pop, and we probably get some of that. You can see it popping right now, okay? Now we're going to let this sit at room temperature. That's about 70 degrees, and I mean a real 70 degrees, okay, for 5 hours. And just like all the other projects, we're going to come back and unmold this so I can show you the results. Once again, and I have the CopyFlex mold that we poured into the mold box made with safety clay. And why don't we unmold this just to see how it comes out. And so first what we're going to do, see how nicely that safety clay comes off of the CopyFlex when we put a DIT as a release agent. Now I want you to know that you can just use this again for another project, and don't worry about the DIT that's on the clay. You can just work it right into the clay. It's good for it. So we're going to set this aside along with this piece, and you put it in a little Tupperware or wrap it in some plastic, and you can use it your entire career. It never goes bad and it never dries out. So safety clay is such a great tool to have on hand. So now we have our mold, and why don't we take a look at the underside? That's why it's nice working with some clear plexiglass, because you can really see the mold project from the underside. In fact, why don't we just start right now? I'm just going to get something underneath, and let's start it and lift that right off, and you can see that we're just going to take the mold right off of our plate. And let's take this opportunity to wipe. Okay, so what we're going to do is just kind of go around the perimeter and loosen the mold from all sides. And then we're just going to coax it out. Now you want to just take it slow, but look at what we've done. Look at the beautiful details that we have right here. And it's copied just everything from that horse. Let's go ahead and unmold this one. This is really fun. This is one of the really fun parts. Just don't do it too fast. Take it nice and slow and pull out a heavily detailed object like this from all directions. There we go. And there's our second. So there's our finished mold. So what I want to do is I'm going to press some fondant in here so we can actually see what kind of detail reproduction we were able to achieve by making this mold. So now that we've made the CopyFlex mold of these carousel horses, I thought it would be a nice idea in order to see how well the CopyFlex duplicated the details of this pattern here, I thought it'd be nice to press some fondant into the cavity and actually unmold it in order to see how well it does. And so let's see if we got that in the middle of the camera there. Is that a good?
Just a little bit closer to you. There you go.
Okay. So now what we're doing is we're getting a close-up, and as you can see, the CopyFlex has duplicated all the little roses, the texture in the saddle, the bow on the pole that goes through the horse. Look at the mane, how well the mane came out. In fact, in certain ways, I think this blue fondant reproduction of the carousel horse looks even better because you really can see the details. So this is just a good example of how well CopyFlex Liquid actually duplicates every detail, no matter how minute, into a really practically perfect reproduction